Hello and welcome to the Fin to the Woods podcast with me, Finian Hackett. I hope you're all doing well. It's November, it's getting closer to Christmas. There's quite a lot of events coming up this month. Obviously the very large US election looms, and whoever is going to be the next president of the US, we will find out very soon. Slightly scary, I can't lie, but fingers crossed it goes in the right direction in my opinion. But we also have Christmas. That's the most important thing, is now Halloween's out the way, I can start celebrating Christmas. And you might think it's too early, but I disagree. I completely disagree. I think it's the right time. So there is a few Christmas things sprinkled throughout this episode, just from news over the last week or so. But yes, Christmas is just around the corner. So I do apologise if you don't like it, but it's going to become more and more Christmassy on the podcast from now on. I haven't been to see anything in the last week, so I have no productions to update you on, although in a couple of weeks' time I'm going to see the all-male Pirates of Penzance at Wilton's Music Hall, which will be fun, and then also going back to my old stomping ground, GSA, to see their production of the Go-Go's musical Head Over Heels, which I've never seen, don't know much about, but I wanted to go and see this production because it's never really done. So yeah, two quite different productions coming up that I'm going to see. But for now, let's crack on with all the latest theatre news, and there's been quite a lot this week. The world of theatre can't seem to get enough of famous films becoming musicals, and it seems to happen more and more frequently as the years go on. I do like some of them I don't. I do think it's a bit much. I think there's a bit too many in the West End, and it does get a bit boring. It is selling, so those kind of shows do sell, so I'm not surprised that they're the ones that keep running, but it's just disappointing sometimes when new writing and revivals don't necessarily push through as much as these ones that already have existing IP, like Back to the Future, like Mrs. Doubtfire, doing well, but I find it slightly boring when there's so many of them. It becomes a bit oversaturated, if you will. But that hasn't stopped them. There's been more announcements this week, with the first one being Slumdog Millionaire, which is going to be turned into a stage musical, and it's going to have new music by A.R. Rahman, who wrote the music for the very successful film. The film won 8 Oscars for Best Picture, Best Director for Danny Boyle, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Song for Jai Ho, which is a very good song. Obviously now had a bit of a pop culture resurgence thanks to Jane McDonald singing it on her cruising programme, which was very entertaining. But the film was very successful, and I'm surprised it's taken this long to adapt it into a stage show, because it was such a big film and it already has music in it. I've never seen it, actually. Every week I say the same thing. I've never seen it, and my list of films to watch is getting longer and longer. But Slumdog Millionaire was so successful, I'm surprised it's taken quite a long time to get to this point, but it's happening. We haven't really been given a time frame of when or where, but it's going to be produced by Ken Davenport, who's behind many great successful musicals on Broadway, and it's going to, as I say, have new songs, plus the songs such as Jai Ho. So I think that will do really well, but we don't really have a time frame as of yet, but hopefully it won't be too long. Another big adaptation that's been announced this week is 13 Going on 30, which is going to have its world premiere in Manchester next year. So this is based on the 2004 film starring Jennifer Garner, which is a bit of a classic, cult classic, and people love it. And it's one of those films that, a bit like Legally Blonde, a bit like Mean Girls, has a bit of a following. So I'm not surprised it's being turned into a musical, but it doesn't necessarily appeal to me. But that's doesn't mean it's not going to sell when it goes to Manchester and probably beyond. And it's going to be adapted by the original screenwriters of the film, which I think's really good, because often if someone else comes in and does different things to the work, the fans are upset. But if it's the original screenwriters, hopefully they know what they're doing and they'll stick with what they know. And it's going to be directed by Andy Fickman, who directed Heathers. So it's going to run from the 21st of September to the 12th of October next year at the Manchester Opera House. It had very successful workshops last year, and I think Lucy Jones was involved in those, so it'll be interesting to see if she goes further with the full-scale production. But is it necessary for another movie musical adaptation of a film that was not a musical? I don't know. I think it's great when it's a film that was written to be a musical or has existing songs, a bit like Greatest Showman. I'm not surprised that's happening. But when it's just a bog standard film that's been turned into a musical for the sake of making money, I don't necessarily find it the most enthralling. And there's a couple of others mentioned in these new productions this week that are also based on films. So there's been quite a lot, and I would like to know if people actually enjoy all these, or is it just because they know it's going to make money? A couple of bits of Andrew Lloyd Webber news now. The Phantom of the Opera is going to embark on a big North American tour. So this is going to be based on the reimagined 2021 London production with the reduced orchestrations and kind of updated scenery. And this is going to be the first time that the US has seen this version of Phantom. Obviously, Phantom is no longer running on Broadway. It was a staple of the States and New York for a very long time. And there's also been rumblings of this immersive production as well. So Phantom seems to be heading back to the States in different forms. But also this week, Andrew Lloyd Webber has announced his new musical. So it's going to be based off the film, surprise, surprise, The Illusionist from 2006. And it's going to be co-created with Chris Terrio. And it's going to be directed by Jamie Lloyd. Obviously, Jamie Lloyd's behind Sunset Boulevard and Evita, which is also coming back to the West End next year. And they seem to have formed this pair, him and Andrew Lloyd Webber, where they know that they work together well. But I think it'll be interesting to see how Jamie Lloyd handles a new Andrew Lloyd Webber, because I guess there's a lot less pressure in a way, because you don't have prior productions going, oh, that's different, oh, that's this. But also, it's a brand new Andrew Lloyd Webber. And after the failure, really, of Cinderella and Bad Cinderella, both here in the West End and on Broadway, he's got a tough act to follow, I have to say, because not many people will be having very high hopes about it, I imagine. However, it's not even really had a date of production yet, so it's eyeing a London opening, but a New York opening might be possible, and it might be at some point in 2026, so it's all a bit vague at the moment, but that is the news. I'm sure we'll hear more over the coming months and years, but it's clearly in development, and we'll have to see where that one goes. Now, if you missed 222 when it was in the West End 5 different times and also has toured the country as well, then you're in luck, because it's going on another UK tour next year. It's going to open on the 4th of August 2025 in Manchester, and then it's going to tour to places like Brighton, Guildford, Peterborough, Milton Keynes, Glasgow, Cardiff, Plymouth, Bristol, many, many more places as well. I've never seen this because I think I would be petrified. I know people who have been and said it's a bit jump scary. That's not my vibe. That is not my vibe, and I don't think I will be making a visit unless there's someone amazing in it that I was desperate to see. I was really intrigued when Cheryl did it last year or the year before, and I kind of wish I'd gone to see her, because I think it would have been quite fun. However, if it's jump scary, I ain't going anywhere near it. So good luck to the tour, but I will be sending you my applause from very far away. The play The Last Laugh will transfer to the West End following a very successful run at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and this is going to play from the 25th of February to the 22nd of March next year, and it's going to star Bob Golding as Eric Morecambe, Damian Williams as Tommy Cooper, and Simon Cartwright as Bob Monkhouse, and it looks back on the lives and careers of those comedians and the impact they left on their industry. After its run at the Noel Coward Theatre, there are plans to take it to New York and also tour the UK. So if you don't catch it in the West End, it looks like there will be a chance to go and see that play further on in the future. And another transfer, the hit Almeida production of The Years, with the likes of Gina McKee and Deborah Finlay in it, will transfer to the West End as well, this time to the Harold Pinter Theatre from the 24th of January to the 19th of April, and it's going to be produced by Sonia Friedman. Let's pop over to Italy, and there is a new musical about Harry Houdini, the famous magician and illusionist, called The Impossible Man, which is going to premiere in Lake Como in Italy next spring. It's going to star Ryan Silverman, who's been on Broadway and Sideshow and Chicago and Phantom, as Houdini, and it's going to feature many different illusions, some of which have never been seen on stage before. Fun fact for you, Harry Houdini appeared at my family's theatre early on in his career in the seaside town of Eastbourne, and there is a trapdoor in the stage which we believe was built for him, which is pretty cool. A new musical called Scissorhands, a musical reinvented, will have its European premiere at Southwark Playhouse Elephant next year. So this is a reinterpretation of the Tim Burton Edward Scissorhands story and film, and it's a pop musical parody. So it features songs from Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, and Alanis Morissette, amongst other people, and it's being produced by Lance Bass and Michelle Visage, and it's running from the 23rd of January to the 29th of March next year. So another jukebox musical in London, alongside all those other movie adaptations as well. David Baddiel's book The Parent Agency is going to have a musical adaptation next year at the Story House in Chester. It's going to have book and lyrics by Baddiel and music and lyrics by Dan Gillespie Sells, who wrote Everybody's Talking About Jamie. And it's going to run from the 15th of February to the 2nd of March next year. And also, Tony Award winner Cyndi Lauper is working on a musical version of the film Working Girl, which is going to play the La Jolla Playhouse in 2025 over in the States. And this is an adaptation of the 1988 film with Harrison Ford and Sigourney Weaver, and it's going to run from November to December. We don't know the exact dates yet. But this has been in the making since 2017. It's gone through many different changes, many different creatives, many different people involved. But it looks like they've finally settled on a creative team that's going to stick with it now until the end of next year. Kilworth House have announced their major productions for their season next summer, and there are two big musicals. So 42nd Street is going to run from the 3rd of June to the 13th of July, and Grease is going to run from the 29th of July to the 7th of September. And over in the States, the Muni, the big outdoor theatre in Missouri, has announced its 2025 season. Bring It On, which is going to be a Muni premiere, Come From Away, which is also a Muni premiere, Frozen, which is also a Muni premiere, Evita, Dear Evan Hansen, which is also a Muni premiere, and Jerry Herman's La Cage aux Folles. Now, moving on a little bit, a couple of Broadway shows have found their home. So last week I spoke about the fact that when Back to the Future closes, there were rumours that a play starring George Clooney was going to take its place, and it had been that way for a long time. And now it's been confirmed. So George Clooney is going to lead Good Night and Good Luck, which is going to head to the Winter Garden as expected after Back to the Future. Previews begin on March the 12th and it will open on April the 3rd. So this is based on the Clooney written and directed movie from 2005, which received 6 Academy Award nominations. But this will be George Clooney's Broadway debut. So it's quite a big deal for him to be on Broadway, and probably quite a big shot at him trying to get that Tony Award. But I imagine competition is going to be tough. And the musical Real Women Have Curves, which previously announced its Broadway transfer, has now found its Broadway home at the James Earl Jones Theatre after the play Left on 10th closes. A couple of theatre extensions. Mean Girls has extended once again, this time to the 8th of June next year, with 75,000 tickets now on sale. And the tour of Dear Evan Hansen has extended as well. It's now going to play Aylesbury, Birmingham, Alexandra for the second time, the Grand Opera House in York, and it's going to close at the Edinburgh Playhouse on the 5th of July. And our final bit of production news is Hugh Jackman bringing his concert to the UK. So he's doing his residency at the Radio City Music Hall called From New York with Love, but he's going to be doing From London with Love as part of BST Hyde Park on the 6th of July next year. Let's talk about some venues across the country that have had different bits of news this week. So the Beck Theatre in Hayes will officially close on the 13th of January after disputes between Hillingdon Council and the Trafalgar Theatre Company, which currently runs the venue. Their dispute was never rectified. I spoke about this a couple of months ago on here and how important it was that the theatre was saved, and there was a big campaign called Back the Beck, but it looks like things haven't gone to plan and the council are still seeking new management, but from the middle of January it's going to close, which is really sad. No venue should close, no theatre should close, but you've got to have adequate management and you've got to have a good relationship with the council and vice versa, because that needs to work, especially in a community venue. That needs to be the case, that you have a positive relationship, and if that isn't formed, then you're screwed, really. So hopefully they find new management and hopefully the theatre continues to run. A new theatre could be built in Swindon, and you might be thinking that sounds really random, but it's going to be inspired apparently by the ABBA Arena in London, and it's going to be a theatre and concert venue, and this is to replace the ageing Wyvern Theatre which is currently in the town, and this could be as soon as 2026. So this new venue is set to seat 1,200 people and hold over 2,000 people for concerts with standing room, and the Wyvern currently holds 600 people, so it's going to be significantly bigger, double the size. And Swindon has a very large population, over 200,000 people, so to only have a 600-seat venue in the town is a bit odd. So to double that in capacity and triple it when it's a concert is going to be fabulous and a really great idea for the local community. And the Brunton Theatre in Scotland is set to close due to rack concrete. So if you don't know, there was a big concrete scandal where this kind of very airy, bubbly concrete was used in a lot of buildings up and down the UK, and unfortunately it's caused a lot of structural issues and it's not safe, and lots of theatres had it in them, including the Brunton Theatre, and East Lothian Council have voted unanimously to close it because it's going to be too expensive to repair it. It's cheaper to demolish it than it is to do all the repairs, because it would just take too much effort to try and keep the building afloat, because I think there's so much in it, it just wouldn't work. But hopefully they will rebuild the venue. I think that is the plan, but fingers crossed that is going to be the case, because you just never know. Sometimes they might knock it down and realise that it saves them a bit of money. Who knows? But yeah, very sad. But that rack concrete has caused many problems across many different theatres all across the country. Let's talk awards quickly. Danny DeVito is going to be honoured at the 2025 Roundabout Theatre Company Gala on the 10th of March next year for all his work in theatre and the entertainment industry, and the 75th annual Outer Critics Circle Awards will have an eligibility cut-off of April the 25th, with nominations announced on April 28th. The winners will then be announced on May the 12th, with a ceremony for those winners on the 22nd. So that's a little bit of awards news. Not much this week, but as the weeks go by, we're going to start getting Golden Globe news, Oscar news, this, that and the other. So I will keep you updated on any theatre people who get nominated for any of those big awards. A few bits of other theatre news from this week. Broadway will dim its lights at 6:45pm on November the 7th for Dame Maggie Smith, but we are still waiting for a date for the dimming for Gavin Creel. This comes after all those tumultuous discussions about whether it should happen or not, and finally it is happening, which I'm very happy about. The planned world premiere of the Muhammad Ali musical, Ali, has been indefinitely postponed, so this was set to premiere in Chicago next year, but it's been cancelled due to scheduling conflicts within the creative team. Will we ever see it? That's the true question, because if they can't get that creative team back together, maybe it will never happen. Who knows? I haven't really heard much about it to do with who's involved or anything about the production, but it's not happening in 2025. And as I said, Christmas is not too far around the corner, and that means Thanksgiving is very close as well. And The Outsiders, Hell's Kitchen and Death Becomes Her are going to perform at the iconic Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York on the 28th of November, and there have been some iconic Broadway performances at that event with them lip-syncing to their various tracks. There was a beautiful performance of Laura Benanti doing something from My Fair Lady. I loved that. There's been some great performances there, and if you've never seen any of them, they are all on YouTube, so go and have a watch. You will be stuck there for hours. I think that's what I'm going to do after I've recorded this. Before we get on to the casting news, let's talk a little bit about some album news this week. So Joe, the Little Women musical, is going to have a concept album led by Christine Aliado. And this is not the famous Little Women musical with Astonishing in, which Sutton Foster starred in on Broadway in 2005. It's not that, it's a new Little Women musical centering on Jo March. And this concept album will be recorded at Abbey Road Studios next year with a 29-piece orchestra, and there are hopes from this that a semi-staged West End concert will happen. It'll be interesting to see how different from Little Women the musical, the Joe the Little Women musical is, and if there are any similarities there. I always think it's must be quite a daunting task, writing a musical when there is already a musical based around that subject. Unless it's going to be completely different, which it might be, then that's going to be wonderful. But I always think that people are always going to compare, which is never fun, but I guess that's the risk you take when writing a musical based on an existing musical or an existing story. And I love this piece of news. Stephanie J. Block, who won a Tony for playing Cher in the Cher show, is going to co-narrate the audiobook of Cher the Memoir Part 1 alongside Cher herself. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work in regards to the fact of, is she going to be using her Cher voice, or is it just going to be Stephanie J. Block being Stephanie J. Block? I'm really intrigued about how that's going to work. I don't think Cher necessarily wanted to record the whole book by herself, so she wanted to get someone else in from what she said in her statement, and I assume Stephanie J. Block will also be doing part 2 of the memoir, but Cher's career has been long, so it's being released in 2 parts, but that's out in a couple of weeks' time, and I cannot wait to listen. Let's round up with the casting news of the week. So the original 5 cast members of Operation Mincemeat here in the West End are transferring to Broadway. So that's David Cumming, Claire Marie Hall, Natasha Hodgson, Jack Malone, who won an Olivier Award, and Zoe Roberts. They're all going over. Sonia Swaby has withdrawn from the upcoming UK tour of Mary Poppins due to personal reasons, and she is going to be replaced by Sharon Wattis. And Jeremy Jordan is leaving The Great Gatsby over on Broadway on January 19th. However, the show has now extended its booking to the 7th of September next year. It's proving very popular, and they'll get someone else very famous and popular amongst musical theatre fans to take his place, I imagine. The RSC has announced its principal casting for Hamlet, so that's going to be Luke Thallon as Hamlet, joined by the likes of Jared Harris, Nancy Carroll, Elliot Levy, Nia Towle, Anton Lesser, Kel Matsina and Lewis Shepherd. And A Christmas Carol at the Birmingham Rep has also announced its casting, with the likes of Rufus Hound as Jacob Marley and Rebecca Traherne as Mrs. Cratchit. More people joining the A Marvellous Party celebration of Noel Coward have been announced, so Ian McKellen, Derek Jacobi, Alfred Enoch, Joshua James, Samantha Spiro, Marisha Wallace and Leah Williams will all take part in that event now, plus some very special guests that are going to be revealed on the night. Some more casting announcements for the Les Mis Arena Tour as well, so the likes of Katie Hall and Lindsay Haitley are joining it at different points across its tour now in Australia and then going to Asia as well. But during this time, Lucy Jones is returning to the West End production for 8 weeks only, from the 23rd of December to the 15th of February, and that is because Katie Hall is going out to do the arena tour. I'm not quite sure why she's going out and Lucy Jones isn't just going out to do the tour and she's staying in the West End, but there must be reason behind it. But I think it's quite fun that you can just pop back in for 8 weeks, get a quick paycheck and go back home again. Sounds ideal. Over at the Paper Mill Playhouse in America, White Christmas is going to be led by Kelly Byrne, Ashley Blanchett, Max Clayton and Casey Garvin. Clueless in the West End has announced its principal casting. Emma Flynn is going to play Cher, and Keenan McCauley is going to play Josh, and Adriana Hicks, who was part of the original Broadway cast of Six, is going to return to the show as Catherine of Aragon from November the 25th to February the 17th. So, this week's Fin to the Woods vaguely fun fact is to do with Gypsy, which is only opening on Broadway in a couple of weeks' time with Audra McDonald. Very exciting. They've moved into the theatre now. I've seen it all over Instagram. The set looks incredible. I'm so excited. But my fun fact is that Chita Rivera was meant to star in the first ever West End production. She was approached by Arthur Lawrence to do the show in the early 60s, 10 years before it eventually made its premiere over here. They were going to add in dance sequences, they were going to kind of change it up because she was younger, a lot younger than Ethel Merman was, and I think it would have been really interesting. I found this out because I've been listening to her audiobook, I've finished it now, about her career, which is fascinating, but also over on YouTube there is a screen test for a potential film of the musical Carnival, which never happened. However, she speaks in that about the upcoming production of Gypsy and what they're going to do with it. How fascinating, and what a production that would have been. Thank you so much for listening to this short and sweet episode of the Fin to the Woods podcast. I do urge you to go and check out my website, fintothewoods.com. It's had a bit of a redesign and a bit of a rebrand, so it looks a bit more sleek and it's easier to contact me and find out where all my socials are and where you can listen to the podcast. And if you are listening and you are enjoying, please leave a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you might listen to the podcast. But I will speak to you once again next week, and I imagine there's going to be even more Christmas news coming your way.